Hi guys, tonight, we travel quietly into a world that has been resting for thousands of years. The sun has gone down over the long river valley. The heat of the day is slowly leaving the ground. Along the Nile, the water moves gently through the darkness, carrying small sounds from one bank to another. A soft breeze passes over the fields. It touches the tops of reeds and grasses, then moves across the dusty paths between the houses. Somewhere nearby, a door made of wood and woven reeds has been closed for the night. Inside, a family is settling down. There is little light now. Perhaps a small oil lamp is burning beside a wall. Its flame is quiet and yellow. It moves slightly whenever the evening air enters through an opening in the house. Shadows rest across the mud brick walls. The house is simple. The floor is hard and smooth beneath bare feet. A few woven mats have been placed in the sleeping area. Clay jars stand against one wall. A basket rests near the doorway. There may be a small wooden stool, a grinding stone, some cooking bowls, and a few ordinary tools that have been used so many times that their surfaces have become familiar to the hands that hold them. Nothing here is grand. There are no great monuments inside this little home. There is only the quiet rhythm of a family preparing for another night. And tomorrow, when the first pale light appears above the eastern horizon, the same small routines will begin again. Someone will wake. Someone will stretch tired arms. Someone will step outside. Someone will carry water. Someone will prepare food. Someone will walk toward the fields. Someone will open a workshop. Someone will climb into a boat. Someone will sit with a reed pen. Someone will sweep the floor. And somewhere, before the morning becomes warm, bread will already be baking. Ancient Egypt is often remembered through its temples and tombs. But most people did not live inside temples. Most people did not spend their days beside kings. They lived in ordinary houses. They worked with ordinary tools. They became tired. They became hungry. They waited for the cooler hours of the evening. They slept on simple beds or mats. They worried about food, work, family, illness, weather, and the changing level of the river. Their lives were made from small things. And it is these small things that we will quietly follow tonight. Let us remain near the river for a little while. The Nile is dark now. During the day, it reflects the bright Egyptian sun. At night, it becomes almost invisible except where the moon catches the moving surface. A fisherman may still be awake somewhere along the bank. His boat rests close to the shore, tied carefully so that the current will not carry it away. The boat is made of wood or reeds, depending on its purpose and the period. Inside there may be nets folded into a pile. A clay container may hold water. A few simple tools may lie beside the fisherman. There is no hurry. The river has its own rhythm. It has always moved slowly. It moves past fields, past villages, past gardens, past workshops, past farms where people have spent the daylight hours bending over crops. And as the river moves, the people sleep. The ancient Egyptian home was often built from mud brick. Mud brick was practical and familiar. Earth from the river valley could be mixed with water and plant material, then shaped into bricks and left to dry beneath the hot sun. The bricks became firm enough to build walls, and the walls offered shade during the day and shelter at night. The outside of a house could appear plain. A doorway. A few openings. A flat roof. Perhaps a small courtyard. Inside, however, there was movement. There were sounds. There were smells. There were memories. The smell of bread. The smell of smoke from a cooking fire. The dry smell of dust. The earthy smell of clay. The faint scent of linen. The smell of animals kept nearby. The smell of the river after the day had cooled. These were familiar scents. A person living in such a house would know them without thinking. The walls were part of everyday life. They held back the heat. They created shade. They gave a little privacy. They marked the place where one family lived and another family began. In some homes, rooms were arranged around a courtyard. The courtyard could become the center of household activity. Food might be prepared there. Children might play there. People might sit there during cooler hours. Tools could be repaired. Grain could be sorted. Clothing could be folded. A small animal might wander through. The courtyard was not simply an empty space. It was part of the daily life of the house. And during the hottest part of the day, shade became precious. The Egyptian sun could be intense. Morning began gently enough. But as the sun climbed higher, the light became stronger. The ground became warm. Walls became warm. The roofs became warm. People moved more slowly. Workers who had begun their labor early in the morning might pause in whatever shade they could find. A farmer could rest beside a wall. A builder might sit beneath a temporary shelter. A fisherman might remain close to the river. A servant might carry water into a shaded room. The rhythm of the day was shaped by the heat. Work had to be done. But the body could not ignore the sun. So people learned to move with it. Early morning was valuable. Evening was valuable. The middle hours could be endured. And then, slowly, the light would soften. The shadows would become longer. The air would begin to cool. This was when the village seemed to breathe again. People returned from fields and workshops. Dust clung to their feet. Their clothing carried the smell of the day's work. Their hands were tired. Their shoulders were tired. Their backs were tired. A worker might sit down without saying much. Perhaps a bowl of food would be placed nearby. Perhaps there would be bread. Bread was one of the most important foods in ancient Egypt. It appeared in many forms. Different grains could be ground and mixed with water. The dough could be shaped. It could be baked in an oven or near a fire. The process was repetitive. Grain was crushed. Flour was gathered. Water was added. Hands worked the mixture. Heat did the rest. The smell of fresh bread could move through a settlement as the evening approached. For someone who had been working since early morning, that smell would have been deeply familiar. There might also be onions, beans, dates, vegetables, fish, sometimes meat, depending on the person's wealth and circumstances. Food was not always abundant. The lives of ordinary people were closely tied to harvests and river conditions. But meals were still made. They were still shared. A family could sit together in the evening and eat from simple bowls. There might be little conversation. There might be conversation about tomorrow's work. Someone might mention the fields. Someone might mention a damaged tool. Someone might mention a neighbor. Someone might say nothing at all. The sound of eating would mix with the small sounds of the house. A clay bowl placed gently on the floor. A wooden tool moving against stone. The quiet crackle of a fire. A child shifting on a mat. A door opening. A dog moving outside. Then silence returning. These are the sounds that rarely appear in monuments. Yet these sounds filled the lives of ordinary Egyptians. A great temple might survive for thousands of years. A palace might leave behind carved walls. A tomb might preserve paintings. But the ordinary meal of an ordinary family was much harder to preserve. The simple evening. The tired worker. The woman preparing food. The child falling asleep. The fisherman cleaning his net. The farmer checking a tool before morning. These moments disappeared quietly. And yet they happened again and again. The same hands prepared food. The same feet walked familiar paths. The same river reflected the same stars. There was comfort in repetition. A person did not need to wonder what the next morning might contain in every detail. There were duties waiting. There were familiar places. There were familiar faces. The household had its own rhythm. And so, as night deepens, we can imagine one small family settling into that rhythm. The cooking fire has become smaller. The bread has been stored. The bowls have been cleaned. Water jars are standing near the wall. A small lamp burns with a steady flame. The youngest members of the household have fallen asleep. An older person may still be awake. Perhaps they are repairing a piece of cloth. Perhaps they are simply sitting. The roof above them is flat. On warmer nights, sleeping on the roof could offer relief from the heat inside the house. The night air could be cooler. A person could lie on a mat beneath the open sky. Above, the stars would be bright. There would be no electric light to soften them. The darkness would be deep. The Milky Way would stretch across the sky. The Nile Valley would become a quiet ribbon of life beneath it. Somewhere in the distance, another household might still have a lamp burning. A dog might bark once. A donkey might make a sound. A person might walk along the road. Then the village would become quiet again. Sleep in ancient Egypt was not always comfortable. Some people had beds made from wood. Others slept on mats. The wealthy could have raised beds with woven surfaces and wooden frames. Ordinary families could have simpler arrangements. A rolled mat. A folded cloth. A low platform. Perhaps a small wooden headrest. Headrests were used in ancient Egypt. They were not soft pillows in the way we might imagine them. They were firm objects designed to support the head. A person could rest their neck upon one while lying down. At first, such an object might seem unusual. But to someone accustomed to it, it would be familiar. The body learns its surroundings. The house. The floor. The mat. The wall. The sounds outside. The smell of smoke. The faint movement of air. All of these things become part of sleep. And sleep itself was necessary after a long day. A farmer needed rest. A fisherman needed rest. A builder needed rest. A scribe who had spent hours writing needed rest. A servant who had carried water needed rest. A woman who had spent much of the day preparing food and caring for a household needed rest. Children needed rest. Everyone eventually became quiet. The lamp burned lower. The darkness grew deeper. And then, after several hours, the first signs of morning would begin. Not with a clock. Not with an alarm. But with light. The darkness over the eastern horizon would slowly become less complete. The stars would fade. The air would remain cool. Birds would begin to move. The river would catch the first gray light. Inside the house, someone would wake. Perhaps they had slept lightly. Perhaps the heat had disturbed them. Perhaps a child had moved during the night. Perhaps an animal outside had made a sound. But eventually, the household would begin again. A person would sit up. A hand would reach for clothing. Feet would touch the floor. A doorway would open. And the cool morning air would enter. This was one of the gentlest moments of the Egyptian day. Before the sun became strong, the village could feel almost peaceful. The roads were still quiet. The fields were still covered in soft morning light. Dew might rest on plants. The Nile moved slowly. Smoke began rising from cooking fires. Women and men began preparing for the work ahead. Bread would once again become part of the morning. Grain had to be ground. This was hard work. Grinding grain required effort and patience. A woman might kneel beside a grinding stone and move the upper stone back and forth. The motion was repetitive. Back and forth. Back and forth. The grain gradually became flour. Fine dust could settle around the work area. The arms became tired. But the motion continued. The family needed food. The work was ordinary. And because it was ordinary, it was often repeated without ceremony. This is one of the quiet truths of ancient history. Most of life was repetition. People did not wake each morning expecting something extraordinary. They woke because morning had come. They worked because work was waiting. They ate because they were hungry. They rested because they were tired. They slept because the day had ended. Then the cycle began again. A farmer would leave the village. The path might be dusty. His sandals could become covered in fine earth. The sun would rise higher. The fields would become brighter. The Nile's water would provide the moisture that made agriculture possible. Egyptian farming depended heavily on the river. The river flooded seasonally, leaving behind fertile soil. Farmers watched the water. They watched the fields. They watched the sky. Their lives were tied to the land in a direct and practical way. A farmer did not need to think about history. He needed to know whether the field was ready. He needed to know whether the soil was wet enough. He needed to know whether the animals were healthy. He needed to repair whatever had broken. He needed to carry out the next task. The work could be slow. Plowing was physical. Harvesting was physical. Carrying baskets was physical. Cutting grain was physical. Walking between fields was physical. The body learned the motions. Over time, the work became familiar. A person could perform the same movement thousands of times. And in the quiet of the morning, those movements created a kind of rhythm. Cut. Gather. Carry. Place. Return. Cut again. Gather again. Carry again. The sun moved slowly across the sky. A shadow shifted along a wall. A bird passed overhead. The river continued flowing. There was no need for the day to move quickly. It simply moved. In villages, other kinds of work were beginning too. A potter might prepare clay. A carpenter might inspect a wooden tool. A weaver might sit with threads. A leather worker might begin another piece of work. A metal worker might prepare copper tools. A scribe might arrange sheets of papyrus. The workshop was often a place of concentrated activity. Several people could work in the same space. The sounds were small but constant. Scraping. Tapping. Grinding. Pulling. Cutting. Writing. Speaking quietly. The air could become dusty. The floor could become covered with small pieces of material. A worker knew where each tool belonged. A tool was not simply an object. It was part of the daily routine. A copper blade. A wooden handle. A stone hammer. A woven basket. A needle. A spindle. A bowl. A jar. Each one had a purpose. Some objects were carefully kept. Others were worn and repaired. People used what they had. They maintained it. They adapted it. They passed things from one generation to another. A house could contain objects that had belonged to parents. A tool might be repaired many times. A basket could be patched. A garment could be adjusted. Nothing needed to look new. It only needed to work. Linen clothing was common. Linen was light and suitable for the warm climate. Clothing could be simple. A worker might wear a short garment that allowed movement. Others wore longer linen clothing. People with more wealth could have finer fabrics. But regardless of status, clothing became part of the body's daily relationship with heat and dust. By afternoon, linen could carry the smell of sweat and work. Dust could settle into the fabric. A person might wash when water was available. The Nile offered a place for washing, though cleanliness involved many different practices. Water was valuable. It had to be carried. It had to be stored. It had to be used carefully. A large clay jar could hold water for the household. Someone had to fill it. Someone had to carry it home. The distance mattered. A short walk with an empty jar was easy. A long walk with a full jar was different. The weight became part of the body. The shoulder adjusted. The hand tightened around the handle. The steps became steady. People who carried water regularly developed their own quiet technique. They did not need to think about every movement. They simply walked. The road beneath their feet was familiar. Dust rose lightly. The sun warmed the back. The jar remained balanced. And eventually, the doorway appeared. Water entered the house. Another small task was complete. Then another task waited. This was the nature of household life. There was always something waiting. A floor needed sweeping. Grain needed grinding. Clothing needed washing. Food needed preparing. Children needed care. Animals needed feeding. Tools needed repair. Water needed carrying. The ancient household was not a place of long empty hours. Even rest had to fit around necessary work. And yet there were quiet moments. A person could sit in the shade. A mother could hold a sleeping child. An old worker could watch the road. A fisherman could sit beside his boat. A scribe could pause and stretch his fingers. Someone could simply look at the river. The Nile was always there. Its presence softened the landscape. Beyond the cultivated fields, the desert began. The contrast was clear. Green fields near water. Dry earth beyond. Mudbrick homes stood between these worlds. The river gave life. The desert gave distance. The road between them carried people, animals, goods, and stories. Merchants traveled along routes connecting villages and towns. They carried grain, cloth, oil, pottery, wood, stone. Other goods moved along the river. Boats could carry heavy loads more easily than people could carry them over land. The Nile was therefore not just water. It was a road. A road that moved continuously through Egypt. A boat might drift along under the warm sun. The sail could catch the wind. The riverbank would pass slowly. Palm trees. Fields. Villages. Mud walls. Animals. People working. A fisherman might cast a net. Children might stand near the water. A farmer might lead an animal along the bank. The journey could be quiet. The boat itself might make soft sounds against the water. Wood creaking. Rope moving. Water touching the hull. A voice speaking quietly. Then silence again. For someone traveling slowly down the Nile, the landscape would unfold without hurry. The same river had been carrying people for generations. And while kings changed, while temples were built and altered, while names were carved into stone, ordinary life continued around the water. A baker still needed flour. A farmer still needed a field. A fisherman still needed a net. A child still needed a place to sleep. A household still needed water. A tired worker still needed somewhere to sit when the sun became too strong. These needs were simple. They were also powerful. They shaped the structure of every day. Near large building projects, workers lived in organized settlements. Some were temporary. Some became substantial communities. The people who worked on major construction projects were not simply shadows in the background of monuments. They had homes. They had food. They had tools. They had families. They became tired. They became injured. They complained about ordinary difficulties. They also rested. When the day's work ended, the great stones became still. The ropes lay quiet. The tools were placed aside. The dust settled. The workers returned to their sleeping places. A construction settlement could remain active for much of the day. People moved through narrow spaces. Food was prepared. Bread was baked. Beer was made. Supplies were distributed. Tools were repaired. Records were kept. Then evening arrived. The workers' bodies were heavy after hours of labor. Some sat together. Some ate. Some spoke quietly. Some simply rested. There was nothing heroic about being tired. Tiredness was a normal part of life. A person who had carried stone or hauled materials through the heat would feel it in the shoulders and legs. At night, the body would remember the day's work. Muscles would relax slowly. Hands might ache. Feet might be sore. Sleep would come because the body had little reason to resist it. The air cooled. The voices faded. The settlement became quieter. And once again, the Nile moved somewhere beyond the houses. The river did not know the names of the workers. It did not know which person had carried a basket or repaired a tool. It simply continued. Water moving through darkness. Wind passing over fields. Stars above the roofs. The same quiet elements surrounding people who had gone to sleep. Illness was also part of this world. Ancient people understood the body through the knowledge available to them. Some illnesses could be treated. Some could not. People used plants, oils, bandages, food, rest, and many other remedies. There were skilled healers. There were also ordinary household practices. A family might care for someone who was weak. A person might remain inside while others worked. A mother might prepare food for a sick child. An injured worker might be unable to perform his normal duties. This could change the entire rhythm of a household. When one person could not work, another person often had to do more. Life was interconnected. The strength of one person affected everyone around them. Still, after illness passed, routines returned. A person might slowly stand. Walk outside. Feel the sunlight. Drink water. Return to a familiar place. There was comfort in familiar things. The doorway. The courtyard. The grinding stone. The riverbank. The path to the fields. The old tree providing shade. The neighbor's house. The workshop. The place where a person had spent so many ordinary mornings. Home was not always beautiful. It did not need to be. Home was where the daily objects gathered, where food was prepared, where clothing was kept, where people knew the sounds of one another, where sleep eventually arrived. And so the ancient Egyptian home was more than mud brick. It was a rhythm, a repeated pattern of small movements. The opening of a door, the lighting of a lamp, the grinding of grain, the carrying of water, the baking of bread, the folding of linen, the cleaning of tools, the preparation of food, the settling of children, the quiet conversation at dusk, the final extinguishing of a small flame. These actions were so ordinary that no one thought they would matter thousands of years later. Yet they are among the most intimate things we can imagine. Because ordinary life leaves very little behind. A wall may survive. A jar may survive. A stone tool may survive. A written record may survive. But the feeling of a tired person lying down after a long day is much harder to preserve. We can only approach it gently. The room is dark. The air has cooled. The day's heat is leaving the mud brick walls. Outside, someone is walking along the road. Their sandals make a soft sound against the packed earth. Step. 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 Then the sound becomes distant. The lamp inside the house is almost gone. A child breathes quietly. Someone turns on a mat. The roof is cool beneath the night air. The river continues moving. And for a few hours, nothing needs to happen. The tools can remain still. The fields can wait. The baskets can wait. The boats can wait. The roads can wait. Even the great stones can wait. Morning will come soon enough. But for now, the ancient village rests. The desert is quiet. The fields are dark. The Nile carries the faint reflection of the stars. And inside the small houses beside it, people sleep in the same simple darkness that covered their ancestors before them. Their lives were not made from great events. They were made from mornings and evenings. From work and food. From heat and shade. From dust and water. From small rooms and familiar objects. From tired hands and sleeping bodies. From another day arriving. And another night quietly following. As the hours pass, the last lamps disappear one by one. The village becomes still. Only the river remains awake. Its surface moves gently beneath the night sky. It passes the sleeping houses. It passes the fields. It passes the boats tied along the bank. It passes the places where people will begin working again when the light returns. For now, there is only the slow water, the soft wind, the dark roofs, the warm walls cooling beneath the stars. And somewhere inside one small mud brick home, an ordinary family sleeps, unaware that the simple shape of their night will one day become part of a distant forgotten history. The river moves quietly beside them. The darkness settles more deeply. And the ancient household remains at rest, waiting for the first pale light of another morning. The river moves quietly beside the sleeping houses, waiting with them for morning. For a little longer, the village remains covered in darkness. The walls are cool now. The roofs hold the last of the night's air. A few stars still shine above the fields, although the eastern sky has already begun to lose some of its darkness. Nothing happens quickly. The night does not suddenly disappear. It simply becomes lighter. A faint gray line appears beyond the fields. Then the shapes of palm trees become easier to see. The river takes on a soft silver color. The houses emerge slowly from the darkness, one wall at a time. Inside them, People begin to stir. Someone turns beneath the woven covering. Someone sits up. Someone reaches toward a clay jar. A small amount of water is poured into a bowl. The sound is quiet. Just a little water against clay. Outside, the first birds begin their morning calls. The village is waking. And once again, ancient Egypt begins its daily movement. Before the heat becomes heavy, there is work to do. A household cannot remain asleep for long. The day depends on many small preparations. A fire must be started. Water must be brought closer. Grain must be prepared. Animals must be checked. Tools must be gathered. Children must be dressed. Food must be made. The first hours of the morning are filled with simple activity. A woman may kneel beside a hearth. She places dry fuel together carefully. A small flame appears. Smoke rises. For a moment, it may sting the eyes. She waits. The flame grows. Soon there is enough heat for cooking. The fire is not large. It does not need to be. A little fuel must last. The household has learned how much wood, straw, or other material is needed. Too much would be wasteful. Too little would not be enough. There is a quiet knowledge in such things. A person who cooks every day knows the fire without measuring it. They know the sound of the fuel. They know when the heat is ready. They know how close to place the pot. They know when the bread should be turned. They know when the food is finished. These skills are learned slowly. Children watch adults. Then, as they grow older, they begin to help. A household is also a place where knowledge passes quietly from one generation to another. Not always through lessons. Often through watching. A child sees how grain is ground. How water is carried. How a basket is repaired. How a fish is cleaned. How linen is folded. How a donkey is guided. How a fire is kept alive. How a room is swept. The child remembers. Years later, the same movements may appear in their own hands. This is how many habits survive. No one announces them. No one writes them down. They simply continue. In the morning, the smell of bread begins to spread. Fresh dough is placed near the heat. The scent mixes with smoke and warm earth. Outside, more doors are opening. People step into the road. The early light is gentle. A man carries a basket. Another person leads an animal. A fisherman walks toward the river. A farmer checks a tool. Someone carries 2 empty jars. Their footsteps leave faint marks in the dust. The road is not straight everywhere. It follows the shape of the settlement. It passes walls, courtyards, small gardens, work areas, animal shelters, storage spaces. Every part of the village has a purpose. Even the empty spaces matter. A narrow passage allows people to move between houses. A courtyard gives air and light. A shaded corner offers somewhere to rest. A flat roof creates another useful place. A wall can become a place to lean against during the hottest part of the afternoon. The ancient home was shaped by climate. Heat was always present. People had to live with it. Thick mud brick walls helped create cooler interiors. Small openings limited the amount of direct sunlight entering some rooms. Courtyards provided air. Roofs offered another sleeping place. Shade was valuable. People learned where shade appeared at different times of day. A wall that was shaded in the morning might become hot later. Another wall might remain cool longer. A doorway could become a small shelter. The entire house had its own pattern of light and shadow. Morning light entered one side. Afternoon light reached another. By evening, the walls began releasing the day's stored warmth. Then the cool air returned. The house changed throughout the day. It was never exactly the same. And the people living inside learned these changes without needing to name them. A farmer leaving before sunrise would feel the difference immediately. The morning air against the skin was almost gentle. The ground was still cool. His sandals touched packed earth. He walked toward the fields. At this hour, the riverbank could be especially peaceful. Mist might hover close to the water in some places. The palms stood still. The first sunlight touched the upper leaves. Birds moved between reeds. Fish disturbed the surface. A boat rested quietly against its rope. The farmer continued walking. The workday was beginning. Agricultural work could take many forms. There was preparing the soil, planting, watering, weeding, harvesting, carrying, sorting, storing. Each task had its own rhythm. A field was not simply a place where crops appeared. It required constant attention. The river made farming possible, but the river did not perform the work itself. People had to guide water. They had to maintain channels. They had to move soil. They had to protect crops. They had to watch animals. They had to gather the harvest when the time came. The work could be tiring. Yet the repetition also brought familiarity. The farmer knew the field. He knew where the ground was harder. He knew where water collected. He knew which parts needed attention. He could look across the land and understand what needed to be done. There was little need for words. The field spoke through its condition. A dry patch. A damaged plant. A broken channel. A footprint. A fallen stalk. Small details mattered. The morning passed. The sun climbed higher. The soft light became stronger. The coolness disappeared. Sweat began to collect on the skin. Linen became damp. Dust stuck to feet and legs. The farmer continued. Then, perhaps, he paused. He found shade. He drank water. The jar felt cool against his hand. For a short while, there was nothing else to do. The river was nearby. A breeze moved over the field. The farmer sat quietly. He could hear distant voices. The sound of an animal. The movement of reeds. Then he stood again. The work continued. Elsewhere, inside a village house, another kind of work was taking place. A woman sat near a doorway where the light was good. She worked with linen. The fibers had to be prepared carefully. Thread was spun. Cloth was woven. The process could take a long time. The hands moved repeatedly. Pull. Turn. Adjust. Pull again. The work was not fast. It was precise. A mistake could mean starting again. The finished cloth could become clothing, household material, or other useful items. Linen was part of everyday life. It touched the skin. It covered bodies. It was folded and stored. It could be washed. It could be repaired. Older pieces could remain in use. Clothing was not something that existed separately from daily life. It moved through the household. A garment could pass from one person to another. It could be altered. It could be patched. It could become smaller as it wore out. The hands of the household kept it useful for as long as possible. Nothing about this was dramatic. It was simply practical. The same practical spirit could be seen in nearly every corner of the home. A broken basket was not immediately thrown away. It might be repaired. A damaged tool might receive a new handle. A cracked container might be used for another purpose. An old piece of wood could become part of something else. People lived surrounded by objects that had histories of their own. A bowl had been shaped by someone's hands. A basket had been woven from plant fibers. A wooden stool had been cut and assembled. A mat had been woven. A jar had been formed from clay. These objects were not anonymous. They belonged to daily life. Some may have been made within the same community. Others may have traveled along the Nile from somewhere else. A merchant could carry pottery, cloth, oil, wood, food, small luxury goods. The market could become busy during certain hours. Voices would rise. People would negotiate. Animals would move through the crowd. Baskets would be placed on the ground. Jars would stand in rows. The air would carry many smells. Bread, fish, spices, smoke, animals, dust, human sweat. The market was less quiet than the household. But even there, daily life followed familiar patterns. The same sellers might return. The same paths might be used. The same goods might appear. A person could recognize a familiar face across the market. A child could remain close to a parent. A servant could carry goods back home. A merchant could keep careful records. A scribe might write down transactions. Writing was another part of this world. Scribes occupied a special place because written records were important to administration. Grain had to be counted. Goods had to be recorded. Workers had to be organized. Supplies had to be tracked. Messages had to be written. The work of a scribe could appear quiet compared with farming or construction. But it required attention. A scribe sat with writing materials. The reed pen was prepared. Ink was available. Papyrus or another writing surface rested nearby. The hand moved across the surface. Stroke after stroke. The writing had to be clear. The work could continue for hours. The scribe's body was not carrying stone. But the mind had to remain focused. A long day of writing could also bring fatigue. The neck could become stiff. The fingers could become tired. The eyes could ache. Still, the work continued. A record had to be completed. A number had to be checked. A name had to be written correctly. Ancient Egypt depended on many kinds of labor. The farmer, the fisherman, the builder, the potter, the baker, the weaver, the carpenter, the servant, the scribe, the boatman, the animal keeper, the stone worker, the household worker. Each person occupied a small place in a much larger system. And most people probably knew little about the lives of those far above or far below them. Their world was close. The family, the neighbors, the workplace, the river, the fields, the road, the local market, the familiar temple or shrine. That was enough to fill a life. Children grew up surrounded by these same places. Their first memories might have been simple. The sound of grinding grain. The smell of bread. The feel of warm earth. The sound of water being poured. A parent's voice. A sibling nearby. A donkey outside. A dog sleeping in the shade. The river visible beyond the houses. As children grew, they began to participate. A young child could carry something light. They might gather small pieces of fuel. They might watch younger children. They might help with animals. They might bring an object from one room to another. Later, their responsibilities would increase. The transition from childhood to working life could be gradual. There was no need for a dramatic moment. One day, the child simply did more. They carried a heavier basket. They stayed longer in the field. They learned a trade. They helped prepare food. They began using tools. They became part of the household's labor. And eventually, their own hands would know the familiar movements. The grinding stone. The fishing net. The wooden tool. The loom. The writing reed. The basket. The plow. The boat. The house itself. The ancient world was full of such learned movements. This is one reason ordinary habits are so important when imagining the past. A person's life was held together by repeated actions. The same path could be walked thousands of times. The same door could be opened every morning. The same place beside the river could be visited each evening. The same cooking pot could be used again and again. The same sleeping mat could become familiar to the body. The same wall could catch the evening light. Home was made from repetition. And repetition could be comforting. Even when work was difficult. Even when food was uncertain. Even when illness appeared. There was something known about the next morning. The sun would rise. The river would still be there. The fields would still need attention. The household would still need food. A person knew what their hands were expected to do. There is a certain quietness in this kind of life. The world may be demanding. But it is understandable. The day has a shape. Morning. Work. Eat. Rest. Evening. Food. Darkness. Sleep. Then morning again. The cycle continues. And in ancient Egypt, the river added another layer to this rhythm. Its changing level shaped the agricultural year. The landscape itself changed. Fields could become wet. Then green. Then golden. Then dry. People adjusted their work accordingly. The river was never merely background scenery. It determined much of the rhythm of life. Boats depended on it. Farmers depended on it. Fishermen depended on it. Settlements grew along it. Travel followed it. Food came from it. Water came from it. The river connected communities that might otherwise have remained distant. A boat traveling north or south could carry people and goods. The journey could take time. There was no need to rush. The boat moved with wind and current. Sometimes the sail was raised. Sometimes people worked the vessel manually. The riverbank passed slowly. A traveler could watch daily life unfolding along the shore. A farmer working. A child standing near the water. A group carrying baskets. A fisherman pulling in a net. A woman washing cloth. A herd moving through the grass. A small village disappearing behind palms. Then another appearing ahead. The traveler could see how similar many lives were. Different homes. Different families. Different occupations. But the same basic needs. Food. Water. Shelter. Rest. Work. Companionship. The Nile carried all of them quietly. At midday, the sun became heavy. The landscape seemed to slow. People searched for shade. The streets became less crowded. Inside houses, the air was dimmer. Thick walls helped keep some rooms cooler. A person could sit on a mat and wait for the strongest heat to pass. Perhaps a bowl of water rested nearby. Perhaps someone was sleeping. Perhaps an older person was simply sitting with their back against a wall. The house became a shelter from the brightness outside. The sound of the village softened. Even animals moved less. A donkey stood in shade. Dogs rested. Birds disappeared into cooler places. The river continued flowing. The heat could feel endless. But eventually, the sun began to move westward. The shadows lengthened. The walls no longer received the full force of the sunlight. People slowly returned to work. Farmers might continue in the fields. Workers returned to workshops. Fishermen prepared their nets. Household tasks resumed. The evening meal would soon need preparation. A day that had begun before sunrise was moving toward its quieter hours. This was the time when the village changed character. The hard brightness softened. Dust became golden. The air became easier to breathe. The river reflected the lowering sun. Palm leaves moved in the breeze. People walked home. Their steps were slower now. They had spent many hours using their bodies. Some carried baskets. Some carried tools. Some carried nothing. Their hands were empty because the day's work had been left behind. The road home was familiar. A person could walk it almost without thinking. Past the wall. Around the corner. Across the small open space. Toward the doorway. Home. Inside, the household was preparing for another evening. The fire was lit. Water was poured. Food was placed out. Children gathered. Someone washed dust from their hands. Someone removed sandals. Someone sat down. The first moments of rest could be almost silent. A worker might simply sit. There was no need to speak. The body needed a moment before eating. The house smelled of smoke and food. Outside, the sunset faded. The sky changed from bright gold to softer colors. Then darkness slowly returned. The same darkness that had covered the village the night before. The same darkness that would return again tomorrow. And again after that. The people of ancient Egypt lived beneath this repeating sky. They watched the sun rise and fall. They watched the river change. They watched crops grow. They watched children become adults. They watched old people grow slower. They repaired homes. They rebuilt walls. They replaced roofs. They made new baskets. They wore old clothing. They prepared meals. They slept. And while the names of rulers were carved into stone, the ordinary names of many households disappeared. Yet the habits remained. A bowl beside a wall. A mat on the floor. A loaf of bread. A jar of water. A basket near the door. A tool leaning against a corner. A sleeping child. A tired worker. A lamp burning softly. These small images belong to the quieter side of ancient Egypt. And as evening settles once more over the river valley, the houses begin to glow faintly from within. One small light. Then another. Then another. The village becomes a scattering of warm points beneath the darkening sky. The roads empty. The fields become quiet. The workshops close. The boats are secured. The animals settle. The tools are put away. The day's work has become tomorrow's memory. For now, nothing needs to be done. The bread has been eaten. The water has been carried. The clothing has been folded. The children are becoming sleepy. The workers are resting. And somewhere beyond the houses, the Nile continues its slow journey through the darkness. Its surface catches the last faint light. Then even that disappears. Only the sound remains. A gentle movement against the bank. A soft rhythm. Water passing reeds. Water passing boats. Water passing fields. Water passing sleeping homes. Inside those homes, people lie down. Some on mats. Some on beds. Some beneath the open sky. The day's heat is still held in the walls. But the night air is cooler now. A breeze enters through the doorway. The lamp grows smaller. A person closes their eyes. The sounds of the village become distant. The body becomes heavy. The hands are still. The feet are still. The work has stopped. For a few hours, the ancient household belongs entirely to sleep. And while the river continues moving outside, the people beside it rest beneath the quiet Egyptian sky. The morning will come. But it does not need to come yet. For now, the darkness remains. The walls are quiet. The mats are still. The lamps are fading. And the old river moves gently through the night. The old river moves gently through the night. Beyond the sleeping houses, the Nile continues its quiet journey through the valley. Its surface is dark, with only small traces of moonlight resting upon it. The reeds along the edge sway whenever the breeze passes through them. Somewhere among them, a bird shifts in its sleep. The village remains still. Inside the homes, the day's work has finally become quiet. There are no grinding stones moving now. No baskets are being carried. No tools are striking wood or stone. No boats are being pushed from the shore. The cooking fires have become small beds of ash. A few lamps may still be glowing. Then, one by one, those lights disappear. The darkness becomes complete. For the people sleeping beside the Nile, this is simply another night. And in the morning, another set of ordinary habits will begin. But before the first light arrives, there is a little more time to remain inside these quiet homes. The sleeping room is small. Its walls are made from earth. The surface may be uneven in places. The floor is hard beneath the woven mat. There is little decoration. Perhaps a small object rests near the sleeping place. A necklace. A comb. A wooden tool. A small container. Something belonging to the person who sleeps there. These objects may seem very simple. But simple objects can carry a great deal of meaning. A comb is used every day. A bowl is touched every day. A garment is worn again and again. A mat receives the weight of a sleeping body every night. Over time, these objects become part of the household almost as naturally as the walls themselves. A person does not need to think about them. The hand simply reaches for them. The feet simply know where to step. The eyes know where things are kept. This familiarity was important. The ancient Egyptian home was a place where a person knew the arrangement of things. There might be a particular corner for storage. A place for cooking. A place for sleeping. A place for grinding grain. A place for washing. A courtyard where work could be done beneath open air. The house had its own small geography. Every member of the family understood it. In the darkness, they could move through it without much difficulty. A person waking during the night could reach for a water jar. They could step around a sleeping child. They could find the doorway. They could feel the wall beneath a hand. The home was familiar even when there was almost no light. And this familiarity made it possible to sleep. Outside, the road was empty. During the day, it had carried people in many directions. Farmers walked toward the fields. Workers walked toward workshops. Children followed adults. Animals moved between houses. Merchants carried goods. Servants carried water. Fishermen went toward the river. At night, the same road became almost invisible. The dust settled. Footprints remained until the next morning. A basket mark. An animal hoof. A sandal print. Perhaps the wind would slowly erase them. By sunrise, new footprints would appear. The road was constantly being rewritten. The same could be said of the household. Every day left traces. Ash from the fire. Flour near the grinding stone. Water spilled near a jar. Strands of fiber from weaving. Dust carried inside on sandals. Food scraps. Broken pieces of pottery. Small signs of ordinary life. The household was never perfectly clean. Dust was everywhere. The desert was close. The river valley was dry beyond the cultivated land. Fine particles could settle on floors and walls. People swept. They cleaned. They moved dust away. But it returned. A broom made from plant material could be used across the floor. The motion was simple. Forward. Back. Forward. Back. Dust gathered into a small pile. It was carried outside. Then the floor was ready again. For a short while. Cleaning was another endless habit. Like cooking. Like carrying water. Like repairing tools. The same work returned because life continued. This repetition might sound tiring. It was tiring. But it was also predictable. A person knew what needed to be done. There was comfort in knowing the next task. A mother preparing bread knew what her hands were doing. A fisherman repairing a net knew which knot belonged where. A carpenter shaping wood knew the movement of the tool. A scribe preparing ink knew the steps. A farmer preparing a field knew the soil beneath his feet. Knowledge was held in the body. It was not always written down. It lived in practiced movements. This kind of knowledge was especially important in a world where many things had to be made by hand. A basket could not simply be replaced by another basket appearing from somewhere distant. Someone had to weave it. A broken tool could not always be easily replaced. Someone had to repair it. A piece of cloth had to be made. A loaf of bread had to be baked. A house wall had to be maintained. A roof had to be repaired after damage. A person's hands were their most familiar tools. And those hands could become very skilled. The village contained many different forms of skill. A potter understood clay. A weaver understood thread. A baker understood heat. A fisherman understood water. A farmer understood soil. A carpenter understood wood. A builder understood stone and mud brick. A scribe understood writing. A household worker understood dozens of small tasks that were rarely noticed because they were simply expected to be done. Each occupation had its own rhythm. Each one had its own tiredness. Each one had its own quiet satisfaction when a task was completed. A potter could lift a finished vessel and examine it. A fisherman could see a full net. A farmer could see a field prepared. A baker could see bread cooling. A weaver could see a length of finished cloth. A builder could see a wall standing straight. These were small accomplishments. They did not require celebration. They were simply part of living. Morning returned slowly. The first birds are becoming louder. A faint light touches the horizon. The people inside the homes are waking again. One household begins with water. Another begins with a fire. A third begins with the sound of a child. A fourth begins with someone coughing softly and then rising from a mat. The village wakes at different speeds. Not everyone rises at exactly the same time. Some work begins early. Some later. The riverbank becomes active first. Fishermen inspect their boats. They check ropes. They arrange nets. They push the boat toward the water. The river is still cool. A person stepping into it would feel the difference immediately. The surface moves around the boat. The first light reflects against the water. The fisherman begins his work. Fishing required patience. The river did not provide food simply because a net was thrown. The fisherman had to know the water. He had to understand where fish might gather. He had to work with currents. He had to handle the net carefully. He had to wait. Much of fishing was waiting. The boat could drift quietly. The net could rest in the water. The fisherman could sit. The sun would rise. The river would continue moving. Eventually, the net would be pulled in. Sometimes it would be heavy. Sometimes light. Either way, the work continued. Fish were food. They could be prepared in different ways. They could be dried, cooked, stored, carried to markets. A successful fishing trip could help feed a household. But fishing was not always successful. The river gave, but it also required skill. Along the fields, farmers were already moving. The morning is still cool enough for work. An animal pulls a simple plow. The farmer walks behind. The soil turns. The animal steps forward. The same movement repeats. The plow enters the earth. The soil breaks. The farmer guides. The animal moves. Again. 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 There is no need for speed. The field is large. The work will take time. A person can spend hours doing something that looks almost identical from one moment to the next. This was common in ancient labor. Repetition was everywhere. The body became accustomed to it. The hands knew the tool. The feet knew the path. The eyes knew what to look for. And the mind could become quiet while the work continued. Perhaps this was one of the rare moments when a worker could think about almost nothing. Only the movement. Only the soil. Only the animal. Only the sound of the wind. The sun rises higher. The shadows become shorter. The air warms. The farmer keeps working. Back in the village, a household is preparing food. The grinding begins. The sound of stone against grain is low and steady. It is not loud enough to dominate the whole village. But near the doorway, it becomes part of the morning soundscape. Grain is placed on the grinding surface. The upper stone moves. The grain breaks. Flour gathers. The work continues. A person might pause to rest their arms. Then continue. Grinding was physically demanding. The shoulders and arms worked repeatedly. The task had to be done because the household needed flour. The flour became dough. The dough became bread. The bread became breakfast. A small household depended on this chain of work. There was no single moment that created the meal. The meal was the result of many small actions. Growing grain. Harvesting grain. Storing grain. Grinding grain. Mixing flour. Preparing the dough. Heating the oven. Baking. Serving. Eating. A simple piece of bread carried all of these steps within it. The same was true of almost everything. A linen garment represented many hours of work. A clay jar represented preparation of clay, shaping, drying, and firing. A wooden stool represented cutting, shaping, and joining. A fishing net represented fiber preparation and careful knotting. Nothing simply appeared. The world was made by hands. This meant that people were constantly aware of materials. Wood, stone, clay, fiber, leather, metal, grain, water. Every material had its own behavior. Clay could be shaped. Stone could be cut or ground. Wood could be carved. Fiber could be twisted. Metal could be worked. Grain could be crushed. People learned these materials through experience. A child might watch an adult working clay. They might place their hand into the soft material. At first, the movement would be awkward. Later, with practice, it would become natural. The same child might eventually become a potter, or a farmer, or a fisher, or a builder, or a scribe. Or they might work within the household. The future was shaped by family, opportunity, social position, and circumstance. But whatever work a person entered, they would spend many years repeating its movements. There is something deeply quiet about skilled repetition. A person does not need to think about every part of the action. The hands move. The body adjusts. The work continues. The hours pass. This is true of weaving. A thread is placed. The loom is adjusted. The shuttle moves. The pattern develops. The hands repeat. A piece of cloth slowly grows. There may be little conversation. Perhaps another person is working nearby. Two people sit together. They work. Sometimes they speak. Sometimes they remain silent. The room is filled with the soft sound of thread moving. Outside, the village continues. Inside, the cloth grows. A similar rhythm appears in basket making. Plant fibers are prepared. They are softened or arranged. The basket is shaped gradually. Each strand becomes part of the structure. The work requires attention. A basket may look simple when finished, but it contains many small decisions. How tightly to weave, where to strengthen, how to shape the rim, how to make the base stable. The finished basket might be used for grain, vegetables, tools, clothing, or household items. It might travel to the market. It might travel in a boat. It might sit quietly beside a wall for years. An ordinary object could pass through many parts of life. The same was true of clay jars. A jar could hold water, oil, grain, beer, other foods. Its shape could be familiar. Its surface could become scratched. Its rim could darken. Eventually it might break. Even then, pieces of pottery remained around settlements. Fragments in the dust. Small pieces that once belonged to someone's daily life. A person might walk past them without noticing. Thousands of years later, those fragments can become clues. They tell us that people cooked, stored food, carried water, used containers, lived in homes. But the fragment does not tell us how the room smelled. It does not tell us whether someone was tired that evening. It does not tell us whether a child was laughing nearby. It does not tell us how the sunlight entered the doorway. Those details have disappeared. And so we have to imagine them carefully. Not with fantasy, but with the quiet evidence of ordinary life. A house was not empty. It was full of movement. A kitchen area was not just a place where pottery was found. It was where someone stood over heat. Where someone kneaded dough. Where smoke entered the air. Where food was prepared. Where a person might wipe sweat from their forehead. Where a child might sit nearby. Where someone might taste a little food before serving it. These small moments belong to history too. The same can be said of sleep. A sleeping place was not simply an object. It was where a person ended the day. A bed or mat held a body that had spent hours working. A headrest supported the neck. A cloth covered the body. The room became quiet. Perhaps insects moved outside. Perhaps wind entered through a doorway. Perhaps someone snored softly. Perhaps a baby woke and was comforted. Night was not always perfectly silent. There were animals. There were people moving through settlements. There were sounds from the river. But compared with the daytime activity, darkness brought stillness. The body could finally relax. And when morning returned, the cycle began again. This repeated pattern lasted for generations. A family might live in one house for many years. The house might be repaired. A wall could be rebuilt. A room could change its purpose. A roof could be strengthened. The household could grow. Children could become adults. New children could arrive. People who had once been young could become old. The house remained around them. The same doorway could be used by several generations. The same courtyard could hold many different conversations. The same wall could witness births, meals, illness, work, arguments, celebrations, and sleep. And then, eventually, the house could disappear. Mud brick does not remain forever. Rain, wind, heat, and time slowly wear it away. Walls collapse. Rooms fill with dust. Roofs fall. The shapes of homes become difficult to recognize. But for the people who lived there, those walls were not temporary. They were home. They were where the family belonged. This is easy to forget when looking at ancient Egypt through monuments. Stone temples seem permanent. Pyramids seem permanent. But most people lived in places that changed and disappeared. Their world was made from materials that returned slowly to the earth. Mud. Wood. Fiber. Clay. Food. Human movement. And perhaps this makes the ordinary household even more interesting. The people who lived there were not trying to create monuments. They were trying to live. They needed shade. They needed water. They needed food. They needed somewhere to sleep. They needed tools. They needed family. They needed work. They needed rest. And each morning, they started again. By late afternoon, the heat begins to soften. A worker returns from the field. His feet are dusty. His clothing is damp with sweat. His hands are rough from the day's labor. He enters the shade. Someone gives him water. He drinks slowly. Then he sits. For a few minutes, perhaps no one asks him to do anything. He simply rests. The silence is welcome. The house is cooler than outside. The walls block some of the fading heat. A child sits nearby. Someone is preparing food. The familiar sounds begin. A bowl. A spoon or simple utensil. The movement of bread. A fire. A quiet voice. The worker watches. His body is tired. The day is nearly finished. Soon, he will eat. Soon, darkness will return. Soon, he will lie down. And tomorrow, his hands will begin again. There is something almost timeless about this rhythm. The details belong to ancient Egypt. The mud walls, the Nile, the linen, the grain, the boats, the desert, the tools. But the deeper rhythm is simply human. Wake, work, eat, rest, sleep, repeat. Thousands of years ago, people also knew the feeling of wanting the day to become cooler. They knew the relief of sitting down after work. They knew the comfort of water when thirsty. They knew the warmth of bread. They knew the quiet of a familiar room. They knew the weight of tiredness. They knew the softness of sleep. These experiences leave very few marks in the archaeological record. But they were probably among the most common experiences of all. As the sun disappears, the village becomes quiet again. The roofs take on the last traces of evening light. The river darkens. A fisherman pulls his boat closer to shore. A farmer stores a tool. A shop or workshop closes. A household carries food inside. A child becomes sleepy. Someone sweeps the floor one last time. The small flame in the cooking area is reduced. The lamp is lit. The night begins. The same roads that were busy in the morning now become empty. The same fields that were full of movement now rest beneath the stars. The same mud brick walls that held back the afternoon heat now begin to release it. And inside the houses, people settle down. There is no need to hurry toward tomorrow. Tomorrow will arrive on its own. For now, the household is quiet. A mat is unrolled. A garment is folded. A water jar is placed within reach. The lamp burns softly. Someone lies down. The body sinks into rest. Outside, the Nile continues. It does not stop when the village sleeps. It moves past the dark boats. Past the reeds. Past the fields. Past the homes. Past the quiet roads. And beneath the stars, the river keeps carrying the night forward. The ancient Egyptians who lived beside it could not know how many generations would follow. They could not know that their homes would one day become silent remains beneath layers of earth. They could not know that their small habits would become things that distant people would try to understand. They were simply living. And perhaps that is enough. A person preparing bread. A farmer walking home. A fisherman tying his boat. A scribe cleaning his writing tools. A mother arranging a sleeping place. A child falling asleep. A tired worker closing his eyes. These are small moments. But a life is made from small moments. The village becomes darker. The lamps disappear. The wind passes softly over the rooftops. The Nile reflects the stars. And once again, ancient Egypt rests beside the water. The houses become quiet. The tools wait. The fields wait. The boats wait. The people sleep. And the night continues, slowly and peacefully, beneath the wide Egyptian sky. The night continues beside the Nile. The river moves beneath the stars, carrying small ripples of reflected light past the sleeping villages. The houses are quiet now. Their mud brick walls hold the warmth of the day. Inside, families lie close together. Some sleep on woven mats. Some rest upon simple wooden beds. Some have chosen the roof, where the air is cooler and the stars seem closer. A few people remain awake. An older person may sit quietly near the doorway. A fisherman may be preparing for an early start. A mother may be soothing a child who has woken. A worker may be unable to sleep because his body is still uncomfortable after the day's labor. Night is not always perfectly peaceful. It is simply quieter. The ancient household had its own nighttime sounds. Breathing. Footsteps. A soft cough. The movement of cloth. The faint crackle of dying embers. The occasional call of an animal outside. Then silence again. The darkness makes the house feel smaller. The familiar objects are still there, even when they cannot be seen. The water jar. The basket. The grinding stone. The wooden stool. The folded linen. The tools. Everything waits for morning. And slowly, sleep returns. Outside, the village is also resting. There is less movement along the roads. The fields are empty. The workshops are closed. The boats remain tied. The river is almost black. Only the faintest breeze moves across the water. For the people living here, this is not an unusual night. It is simply another night. And tomorrow will bring another ordinary day. When morning arrives, the same objects will be touched by the same hands. The same doorway will open. The same road will be walked. The same river will be visited. The same bread will be prepared. The same work will begin. This is the quiet strength of habit. Habit gives shape to a life. In ancient Egypt, habits were often built around the movement of the sun. People rose with the morning light. They worked during the cooler parts of the day when possible. They rested during the strongest heat. They continued when the sun moved lower. They ate in the evening. They slept through the darker hours. The exact schedule differed from person to person. A fisherman did not live exactly like a farmer. A scribe did not work exactly like a stone worker. A servant did not have the same duties as a merchant. But everyone lived beneath the same sun. Everyone felt the same heat. Everyone watched the same river. And everyone knew the difference between morning and midday. Early morning could feel almost cool. The air moved softly across the fields. The light was pale. The ground had not yet absorbed the full heat of the sun. This was a good time for physical work. Farmers could begin early. Construction workers could begin early. Travelers could begin their journeys. Animals could be moved before the day became too hot. Even household tasks could begin before the heat settled into the walls. Then the sun climbed. Shadows shortened. The earth became warmer. People began to seek shade. This was not simply a matter of comfort. Heat affected the body. A person working under the Egyptian sun could become exhausted. Water became important. Rest became important. Shade became important. The rhythm of work had to account for the environment. A builder lifting or pulling heavy materials could not ignore the heat. A farmer working in an open field could not ignore it either. A fisherman might have less shade on the water. A person carrying water could feel the weight more strongly as the temperature rose. So the day naturally became divided. Work. Pause. Work again. The pauses were part of life. A worker might sit beside a wall. A farmer might rest beneath a tree. A boatman might sit at the edge of his boat. A household worker might remain indoors. These moments were not wasted. The body needed them. A person could drink. Eat something small. Breathe. Stretch. Wait. Then continue. The village around them would also slow down. The streets would become less crowded. Children would find shade. Animals would rest. Doors might be partially closed. The interiors of houses would become dim. This was the quiet center of the day. And as the afternoon passed, the village gradually became active again. A shadow moved across a wall. The sun descended. The air softened. The people returned to their tasks. This daily movement between heat and shade shaped the architecture of the home. Mud brick was useful because it could create thick walls. The material came from the earth. It was available locally. It could be formed into blocks and dried. A wall built from many such bricks could create a strong shelter. The surface might be plastered or maintained in different ways. But over time, cracks could appear. The household had to watch for damage. A roof could require attention. A wall might need repair. Mud was not permanent. It needed care. After certain weather conditions, repairs became necessary. A household might mix new mud. A damaged section could be filled. A surface could be smoothed. The work was simple but important. A home was never entirely finished. It required maintenance. The same was true of nearly everything. A boat needed repairs. A net needed repair. A tool needed sharpening. A basket needed strengthening. Clothing needed washing and mending. A cooking vessel could break. A wooden object could become loose. The ancient world required constant attention. There were few things that could simply be forgotten. If a tool broke, work became harder. If a roof leaked, the sleeping area was affected. If a water jar cracked, water could be lost. If a fishing net tore, the next day's work could suffer. So maintenance became another habit. People learned to care for the things they depended upon. The home itself could contain signs of this constant repair. A wall might have a slightly different patch of mud. A wooden beam might have been replaced. A mat might have been repaired with another piece of fiber. A jar might have a small imperfection. The house did not need to be perfect. It only needed to remain useful. This practical attitude extended to clothing. Linen was valuable because it could be worn repeatedly. Clothing could become worn from use. It might be washed, dried, folded, repaired. A torn section could be stitched. A garment could be altered. Someone in the household might spend part of the day repairing clothing rather than making something entirely new. The work was slow. A needle moved through fabric. Pull. Tighten. Cut. Repeat. The finished repair might hardly be noticed. And that was the point. The garment could continue to be worn. Children's clothing could be adjusted as they grew. Older clothing could become work clothing. Better clothing could be saved for special occasions. Different levels of wealth meant different experiences. A wealthy household could have more servants, more rooms, better furniture, more finely woven linen, more varied food. A poorer household had fewer resources. Yet both households still had daily routines. Both needed food. Both needed water. Both needed sleep. Both had people who became tired. The difference was in how much choice they had. For an ordinary worker, the day's labor could be difficult to avoid. Work was tied closely to survival. A person who worked in agriculture depended on the land. A worker in a workshop depended on the workshop. A fisherman depended on the river. A servant depended on the household where they worked. A builder depended on organized labor. Their lives were shaped by duties. And yet within those duties, there were small moments of freedom. A conversation. A quiet meal. A walk beside the river. A short rest in the shade. Time with family. A moment watching the sunset. Perhaps an evening on the roof. Perhaps a little music. Ancient Egyptians had musical traditions, and music could accompany many parts of life. In a household or gathering, simple instruments could create gentle sounds. A harp, a flute, a drum, clapping, singing. Not every evening would have music. Most evenings were probably ordinary. But sound could become part of social life. A celebration could be louder. A religious event could involve music. A household gathering could include singing. Yet even these moments would eventually become quiet again. Night would return. People would sleep. The next day would begin. Children were an important part of household life. They were not separate from the work of the home. From a young age, children could observe everything around them. They watched adults preparing food. They watched workers using tools. They saw boats on the river. They saw animals. They learned where water came from. They learned where food came from. They learned how people behaved within the household. The village itself was a place of learning. A child did not need a formal lesson to understand that bread came from grain. They could see the process. They might touch the flour. They might carry something. They might watch the oven. They might receive a small piece of bread. The lesson was part of daily life. The same happened with farming. A child walking with a parent could begin to understand the fields. Which plants were useful. Where animals were kept. How tools were held. How the river affected the land. A child could learn by doing. The older they became, the more responsibility they could take. This gradual increase in responsibility was another form of habit. One small task led to another. A person became useful because they had practiced. Eventually, the household depended on their work. And when that child became an adult, the same cycle could begin with the next generation. The household was therefore a place where time moved through people. Grandparents, parents, children, each generation occupying the same rooms, the same courtyard, the same village, perhaps even the same fields. Some families remained near the same places for long periods. Others moved for work. Labor projects could bring people together from different regions. Military service could take people away. Trade could create journeys. But many ordinary people remained close to their homes. Their world was local. The river valley could be enough. A village might feel like the center of everything. The road beyond it could lead to another settlement. The river could lead to distant towns. But home remained the place of return. The idea of home was tied to routine. A person knew the path. They knew the neighbors. They knew where to find water. They knew where to buy or exchange food. They knew the fields. They knew the riverbank. They knew where the sun disappeared behind the buildings in the evening. Familiarity created a sense of belonging. And when a person returned after a journey, even a simple mud brick doorway could feel deeply familiar. The household also contained private habits. Some people preferred sleeping on one side. Some arranged their possessions in a particular way. Someone might always sit in the same place during meals. A worker might keep a favorite tool near a certain wall. A child might sleep beside a particular family member. These tiny details rarely survive in historical records. But every household had them. Every family developed small patterns. The ancient world was not filled with people behaving exactly the same. They had personalities, preferences, fears, affection, disagreements, friendships. They could be impatient. They could be kind. They could be tired. They could be hopeful. They could worry about tomorrow. They could look forward to a meal. They could miss someone who was away. They could enjoy a cool evening. These feelings do not belong to any one period. They belong to people. But the environment gave them a particular setting. The Nile. The desert. The mud brick house. The fields. The heat. The stars. The boats. The workshops. The ancient roads. A worker coming home in the evening might see the same landscape that generations before had seen. The sun lowering behind the horizon. The fields turning darker. Birds returning to their resting places. Smoke rising from cooking fires. The river reflecting the fading light. Perhaps he would stop for a moment. Not because he had nowhere to go, but because the evening was pleasant. The day's heat was finally leaving. The air was cooler. The body was tired. The work was finished. Then he would continue toward home. His sandals would make a soft sound against the earth. Step. 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 The sound would blend with others. Then disappear. Inside the home, food was waiting. Perhaps bread. Perhaps vegetables. Perhaps fish. Perhaps a simple bowl of grain. Beer could also be part of the diet. Food and drink varied with wealth and circumstance. A wealthy household could have greater variety. An ordinary worker's meals might be simpler. Still, eating was an important part of the evening. After physical work, food restored the body. A person could sit with others. The meal did not need to be elaborate. The important thing was that it was there. A bowl. A loaf. A little fish. A few vegetables. A drink. A place to sit. A little time. The conversation might be about work. It might be about family. It might be about something that happened in the village. Or there might be no conversation. Sometimes tired people simply eat. The room becomes quiet. The fire makes a small sound. Someone outside calls to another person. A child becomes sleepy. The evening continues. After eating, the household returns to its smaller tasks. Food is stored. The fire is reduced. Bowls are cleaned. Clothing is arranged. The floor is swept if necessary. Water is checked. Animals are secured. Doors are closed. The day is gradually put away. This process is almost like preparing the house for sleep. One object after another returns to its place. The household becomes still. A person who has spent the entire day working may feel their eyes becoming heavy. They lie down. Their body remembers the day's movement. The shoulders relax. The hands stop. The feet stop. The mind becomes quieter. Outside, the Nile continues to move. The same water that supported the fields now reflects the stars. A small boat rocks gently against its rope. A reed bends toward the water. A night bird calls. Then silence. The sleeping house remains surrounded by these sounds. A family member turns over. A mat shifts slightly. Someone breathes deeply. The lamp burns low. The night becomes deeper. And for a while, the ancient household has no responsibilities. The fields do not need attention. The workshop is closed. The market is empty. The tools can wait. The river does not ask for anything. The house simply rests. This quiet pause is part of the story too. History is often filled with movement. But ordinary life contained long stretches when almost nothing happened. People sat. People waited. People slept. People watched the river. People rested in shade. They did not spend every hour producing something. There were pauses. There were quiet moments. There were evenings when the only important thing was reaching the end of the day. And perhaps the most peaceful image of all is a small home beside the Nile after everyone has gone to sleep. The walls are dark. The roof is cool. A woven mat lies beneath a sleeping body. A water jar stands nearby. A folded piece of linen rests against the wall. A basket sits in a corner. The doorway is closed. Outside, the road is empty. Beyond the road, the fields are dark. Beyond the fields, the river moves. Beyond the river, the desert waits beneath the stars. Everything is quiet. Nothing needs to happen. The ancient household is simply there. And slowly, the hours pass. The night becomes cooler. The stars move across the sky. The river continues its patient journey. The people sleep. The houses sleep. Even the tools seem to sleep. Tomorrow they will be touched again. Tomorrow hands will pick them up. Tomorrow feet will walk the roads. Tomorrow fires will burn. Tomorrow grain will be ground. Tomorrow boats will move. Tomorrow the fields will receive another day's labor. But not yet. For now, there is only darkness. A soft breeze. The smell of earth. The faint scent of river water. The warmth of mud brick slowly fading into the night. And somewhere inside the quiet house, an ordinary person sleeps beneath the same ancient sky that has watched countless mornings arrive over the Nile. The night holds them gently. The river keeps moving. And the old habits of the household wait quietly for another sunrise. Another morning begins beside the Nile. The darkness has thinned into a pale gray light, and the first shapes of the village are becoming visible again. The roofs are quiet. The walls are cool. The roads are empty except for a few early footprints. Then a door opens. Someone steps outside. The day begins without ceremony. There is no announcement. No great event. Just another morning. A person walks toward the river carrying a container. The water is calm. The first sunlight touches the eastern edge of the sky. The person kneels. The container is lowered. Water enters. The jar becomes heavier. Then the person lifts it carefully. The journey home begins. This simple act of carrying water could happen every day. For some households, the river was close. For others, the distance was greater. The weight of water was familiar. A person learned how to balance it. They learned how to walk without spilling too much. They learned how to pause. They learned where the road was smooth. They knew which corner offered shade later in the morning. Such knowledge was rarely written down. It lived in experience. The same kind of knowledge shaped almost every part of ordinary Egyptian life. A baker knew how much fuel was needed. A farmer knew when a field needed attention. A fisherman knew where to cast a net. A builder knew how mud behaved when mixed correctly. A weaver knew how tightly to pull a thread. A potter knew how clay felt beneath the fingers. A scribe knew how much ink to place on the reed. People learned by doing. And because they did these things repeatedly, their movements became quiet and confident. The household begins to wake. The first fire is lit. Smoke rises into the morning air. A child sits near the doorway. Someone begins grinding grain. The stone moves with a slow, steady sound. The flour gathers. Bread will come later. For now, the morning is still cool. The work feels easier than it will in the afternoon. This is why early hours were precious. The body had more strength. The air was gentler. The sun had not yet become heavy. People could accomplish much before midday. In the fields, workers were already moving. A group walks together along the edge of cultivated land. They carry tools. Some carry baskets. An animal walks beside them. The fields are green in certain seasons, golden in others. The color of the land changes with the agricultural cycle. The Nile makes this possible. Without the river, the valley would be very different. The desert lies beyond the cultivated land. Dry. Open. Quiet. But close to the water, plants can grow. Grain can be harvested. Vegetables can be raised. Trees can provide shade and fruit. Animals can feed. The river valley becomes a narrow strip of life surrounded by dry country. People know the boundary. They live within it. They travel across it. They depend upon it. A farmer can stand at the edge of a field and look toward the desert. The difference is visible. Green against brown. Water against dryness. Shade against open sunlight. The cultivated land feels precious. The farmer turns back toward the field. There is work to do. A tool enters the soil. The earth breaks. A basket is filled. A plant is cut. A load is carried. The same motions repeat. The body becomes warm. The sun rises. The morning passes. Back in the settlement, household work continues. A woman may be preparing vegetables. She sits close to the ground. A simple knife is used. The food is cut into pieces. A pot waits nearby. A little water is added. The fire provides heat. The process is slow. Cooking was often a long part of the day. Food had to be cleaned, cut, mixed, heated, washed, turned, stored, served. The person preparing it had to remain nearby. A meal could not simply be forgotten. The fire had to be controlled. The pot had to be watched. Fuel had to be added. And while the food cooked, other work could continue. A person could mend clothing, sort grain, care for children, prepare a basket, clean a room. The household often required several things at once. There was always another task. This is one reason ordinary life could be physically demanding even outside formal labor. A person's day was filled with movement. Carrying, lifting, bending, walking, grinding, sweeping, cooking, washing, repairing, waiting, standing, sitting, then beginning again. The work of a household could be as repetitive as the work of a field. It simply took place in a smaller space. The courtyard could become the center of this activity. Light entered from above. Air moved through. Children could remain nearby. A cooking fire could be placed where smoke would have somewhere to escape. Tools could be stored against a wall. A person could sit in the shade. The courtyard was part kitchen, part workplace, part gathering place. Its exact arrangement varied from home to home. Some homes were larger, some smaller. Some belonged to wealthy families, some to workers, some to servants. The materials could remain similar. Mud brick, wood, linen, clay, stone, plant fiber. But the scale changed. A wealthy household might have more rooms, more storage, more furniture, more servants, more decorative objects. An ordinary worker's home might contain only what was needed: a sleeping place, cooking equipment, storage vessels, tools, simple furniture, perhaps a small amount of decoration. The difference between households could be great, but the basic cycle of life remained: morning, work, food, heat, rest, evening, sleep. The poorest and richest households both experienced the rising sun. Both knew when the day was becoming hot. Both could hear the river. Both eventually became tired. Both slept. This shared environment connected people even when their social positions were very different. The Nile was always nearby. And the Nile itself had many kinds of life. Fishing was one. Fishermen worked along the banks and from small boats. Some used nets. Others used lines or other tools. They needed patience. The river was never completely predictable. A person could wait for a long time. They watched the surface. They watched the movement of fish. They watched birds. They watched currents. A fisherman developed an intimate knowledge of the water. He could recognize changes. The river could look different after wind. Different under the morning sun. Different after rainfall farther upstream. Different during different seasons. A person who spent much of life on the river would know these changes instinctively. The same was true for farmers. The land had its own signals. Plants, soil, moisture, animals, wind, sky. A farmer learned to notice small differences. The work was not simply physical. It required attention. Ancient life could be very observant. People depended upon the world around them. They had to notice things because their lives were directly affected by them. A broken rope mattered. A sick animal mattered. A damaged crop mattered. A cracked water jar mattered. A missing tool mattered. Small problems could become larger problems if ignored. So ordinary people became careful. They repaired. They stored. They checked. They reused. They remembered. A good worker knew their tools. A good household knew its supplies. A good farmer knew their field. A good fisherman knew their river. Knowledge came from years of living. And much of it was passed through families. A father might teach a son. A mother might teach a daughter. But skills were not always divided so simply. Households depended upon cooperation. Everyone could contribute. Older children could help younger children. Adults could share tasks. Older people could provide knowledge even when they were no longer strong enough for heavy labor. An elderly person might sit in the shade and supervise. They could explain how something was done. They could tell a younger worker which tool to use. They could remember where something had been stored. Their knowledge remained valuable. Age changed the body. A person who had spent decades working in fields or workshops could eventually become slower. Hands might become stiff. Eyes might become weaker. Walking might become harder. But the person still belonged to the household. They still had a place. They could prepare food. Repair small objects. Watch children. Offer advice. Tell stories. Remember family history. The household therefore contained different generations at once. A child learning. An adult working. An older person remembering. The same home could hold all three. And this made the house a place where time was visible. A child's height might be marked by memory. A young worker might become an experienced worker. An older person might watch the next generation repeat the same habits. The tools remained. The work remained. The river remained. The house might change. But the rhythm continued. In the late morning, the heat becomes stronger. The farmer wipes sweat from his face. The fisherman pulls his boat closer to a shaded bank. The worker in the workshop pauses. The household closes some openings to reduce the harsh sunlight. Inside, the room becomes darker. The temperature may remain more manageable. A person sits. They drink. They rest. The village slows. The strongest part of the sun passes overhead. The sky is bright and almost empty. There is little cloud cover. The desert beyond the fields appears almost white in the heat. The distant ground shimmers. A person walking across open land feels the sun directly. There is nowhere to hide except beneath occasional trees, shelters, or walls. This is why shade mattered so much. Shade was not decoration. It was shelter. A wall could create a small patch of cool ground. A roof could provide relief. A palm tree could cast a narrow shadow. People moved toward these places naturally. A tired worker sits with his back against a wall. His eyes close. He can still hear the village. A faint voice. A bird. An animal. Someone moving a basket. The river in the distance. He does not need to speak. For a moment, he simply rests. Then he opens his eyes. The day continues. In another house, a child is sleeping through the hottest part of the day. The room is dim. A cloth covers the child. An older family member remains nearby. The child breathes slowly. Outside, the village is quiet. This kind of midday rest could be one of the few moments when a household became almost still. Then, gradually, the afternoon begins. The shadows return. The air softens. People emerge. Work resumes. A group of workers carries materials. The baskets are heavy. They are lifted. Carried. Placed. Returned. Again. Again. The work can be repetitive. But the group moves together. One person lifts. Another receives. Another carries. Another places. The rhythm becomes coordinated. In larger work settlements, organization was important. Food had to reach workers. Water had to be available. Tools had to be supplied. Materials had to be moved. Records had to be kept. Different kinds of workers had different tasks. A person might never see the whole project. They might know only their part. A stone worker understood stone. A transporter understood movement. A cook understood food. A baker understood bread. A scribe understood records. A supervisor organized workers. Together, these people formed a working community. But when the day ended, they still needed ordinary things. Food. Water. Rest. Sleep. A worker could spend the day surrounded by massive stones and still return to a small sleeping space. The monument was large. The human body was small. The body still became tired. At night, the scale of the great project disappeared into darkness. The stones became silhouettes. The tools became quiet. The workers became individuals again. A man might sit with his friends. They might share food. They might talk about work. Someone might complain about sore muscles. Someone might laugh quietly. Someone might simply lie down. There was no need for every evening to be memorable. Most evenings were not. They were simply evenings. The day's labor had ended. The body wanted rest. That was enough. Back in a village home, a family begins preparing its meal. Bread is placed near the heat. Vegetables are cooked. Fish may be prepared. Beer or water is served. The smell fills the room. The children become more active. Someone has returned from the fields. Another has returned from the workshop. The family gathers. The meal is shared. There is a moment when the whole household is together. The day has scattered people into different directions. Now they are in one place again. The evening meal restores the sense of togetherness. A person eats slowly. The body begins to relax. The food is warm. The room is cooler. The light outside is fading. The walls begin to lose the heat they stored during the afternoon. The house becomes comfortable again. Someone opens a doorway. A breeze enters. The smell of the river comes with it. Water. Wet earth. Plants. Smoke from distant fires. The sounds of evening drift in. A boatman calls to someone. A dog moves along the road. A child speaks. Then the voices fade. The family finishes eating. The dishes are moved aside. The fire is reduced. The household begins its nighttime routine. Clothing is arranged. Tools are placed where they belong. Water is left within reach. The sleeping mats are prepared. Someone checks the doorway. The lamp is lit. The room glows softly. The light reaches only a small area. Beyond it, the house is dark. This small circle of light creates a feeling of shelter. Outside is the enormous night. Inside is the quiet household. The people sit close to the flame. Their faces are softly illuminated. The walls behind them remain shadowed. The lamp moves slightly. A breeze enters. The flame bends. Then steadies. Someone speaks. Another person listens. The conversation becomes slower. The day is almost finished. Soon the lamp will be extinguished. The people will lie down. The village will become quiet again. But before that happens, there may be a little time for simple companionship. A family does not need a special occasion to sit together. They can simply remain together because the day's work is done. A child may lean against an adult. Someone may prepare tomorrow's clothing. Someone may inspect a small tool. An older person may sit quietly. The fire becomes smaller. The lamp becomes dimmer. The night deepens. Outside, the Nile is almost invisible. Only its sound remains. The river does not sleep. It moves beneath the darkness. The current carries floating plants. The banks remain still. A boat gently rocks. The rope tightens. Then relaxes. A small sound. Then quiet. The stars continue moving overhead. People have been looking at these same stars for generations. Farmers. Fishermen. Builders. Scribes. Children. Old people. Travelers. They all lived beneath this sky. They watched the stars while walking home. They watched them from rooftops. They watched them from boats. They watched them while resting beside the fields. The night sky belonged to everyone. It was one of the few things that surrounded every household regardless of wealth. A rich home and a poor home both opened onto the same darkness. The same moon could shine through both. The same wind could enter both. The same river flowed past both. And eventually, every person needed sleep. The household becomes quiet. The lamp is extinguished. Darkness fills the room. A person lies down. The mat is firm beneath the body. The air is cool enough now. The sounds outside become distant. A child turns. Someone breathes deeply. The night continues. There is no need to think about tomorrow yet. The tools can wait. The fields can wait. The market can wait. The boat can wait. The household can rest. And in this quiet darkness, the ancient Egyptian home becomes almost timeless. A simple room. A woven mat. A water jar. A clay bowl. A folded garment. A wall of earth. A small opening to the night. Nothing grand. Nothing dramatic. Just a place where people lived. A place where they worked. A place where they ate. A place where they became tired. A place where they slept. The river continues beside them. The wind passes over the fields. The desert remains beyond the cultivated land. The stars move slowly across the sky. And the people sleep, gathering enough strength for another morning of familiar work. The same habits will return. The same bread. The same water. The same roads. The same fields. The same tools. The same river. The same quiet movement of life. For now, though, the house is still. The night is wide. The Nile is dark. And the ancient village rests beneath the stars. The night has grown very quiet beside the Nile. The last lights have disappeared from the houses. The cooking fires have become soft gray ash. The tools are resting where they were left. The baskets are empty. The water jars are still. The sleeping mats hold the quiet weight of tired bodies. Outside, the river continues its slow movement through the darkness. It has no need to hurry. It simply flows. Past the fields. Past the palms. Past the small villages. Past the boats resting against their ropes. Past the old roads where footsteps will return with the morning. The people sleeping beside the river do not know that their ordinary lives will one day become distant memories. They do not know that their homes will disappear beneath the earth. They do not know that their simple bowls, tools, baskets, and pieces of pottery will remain long after their voices are gone. They are not thinking about history. They are simply sleeping. And perhaps that is the quietest part of the story. Ancient Egypt was not only a land of kings and temples. It was also a land of tired farmers returning home. Of fishermen waiting patiently beside the water. Of workers resting after long days beneath the sun. Of children falling asleep beside their families. Of bread being baked in small homes. Of linen being folded. Of water being carried. Of lamps burning softly against mud-brick walls. Of people sitting together at the end of another ordinary day. Life moved through these small habits. Morning came. Work began. The sun became hot. The river continued. Evening arrived. Food was prepared. People rested. Night returned. And then, quietly, morning came again. For generations, the rhythm continued. A person could wake beneath the same sky their parents had known. They could walk the same road. Drink from the same river. Work the same field. Use the same kind of tool. Sleep beneath the same stars. The world changed slowly around them. but the basic needs of the household remained: shelter, water, food, rest, companionship, sleep. These simple things were enough to fill a life. Now the village is completely still. The breeze has become softer. The river reflects a little moonlight. The reeds move gently along the bank. A distant bird calls once. Then silence returns. The mud-brick walls are cool beneath the night air. The roofs are quiet. The roads are empty. The fields are resting. Even the desert seems peaceful beneath the stars. Somewhere inside one small house, a person turns slowly in sleep. Another breathes deeply. A child remains still beneath a simple covering. An older person sleeps beside them. The household has finally become completely quiet. Nothing needs to be repaired tonight. Nothing needs to be carried. Nothing needs to be harvested. Nothing needs to be written. Nothing needs to be built. For a few precious hours, the work of the ancient world can wait. The river keeps flowing. The stars keep moving. The night keeps passing. And the people sleep. Soon enough, the eastern sky will begin to brighten. The first birds will wake. The river will catch the morning light. A door will open. A fire will be lit. Grain will be ground. Water will be carried. Feet will touch the dusty road. Farmers will return to their fields. Fishermen will return to their boats. Workers will return to their tools. The ancient rhythm will begin once more. But that morning does not need to arrive yet. For now, let the village remain beneath the darkness. Let the houses remain quiet. Let the river move slowly through the sleeping valley. Let the warm walls hold the last traces of the day. Let the soft wind pass over the rooftops. And let the stars remain above the Nile. The people of ancient Egypt lived ordinary lives. They worked. They rested. They ate. They loved. They grew old. They slept. Their names may be forgotten. Their houses may have disappeared. Their footsteps may have faded from the roads. But the quiet pattern of their lives still remains in the objects they left behind and in the simple traces beneath the earth. A bowl. A jar. A mat. A tool. A wall. A piece of linen. A worn path. Small reminders of people who once woke with the sun and returned home when the light was fading. For tonight, we can leave them there. Not in the noise of temples. Not beneath the weight of monuments. But beside the river. Inside their quiet homes. Resting after another long day. The Nile moves gently beside them. The darkness settles deeper. The stars become softer. The wind passes. The houses remain still. And the ancient world slowly fades into the quiet of the night. The river carries the final sounds away. The fields sleep. The desert sleeps. The village sleeps. And beside the peaceful Nile, beneath the wide Egyptian sky, the old homes and their forgotten habits finally become quiet. The night continues. The river flows. And everything is at rest.